of these individuals who was invited to be in this study, and you're making the decision whether to be in as an active person in the study to receive access to telemedicine or not. Because remember, as Erin said, first we're taking everybody who's given informed consent that agreed to be in the study, and they're going to be giving access to telemedicine. And those who decline, they'll then be invited to be in the comparison group. So the individuals themselves are making a decision. To Erin and everyone's concern is that the person who agrees to be in the study might be different from the person who doesn't want to be in your study. Some people consider experimental studies as being unethical. And there have been terrible examples in the past where bad things were done to people in the name of science that shouldn't have been done. And that might turn some people off. So there's a possibility that the educational status, for example, of those who agree to be in the study in the telemedicine group might be different from the educational levels of those not. The culture of people might be different. The social economic status might be different. Poorer people might not be willing to be in the study, or poorer people might be willing because they don't have enough, educational background to think carefully about it. The bottom line is that what we're concerned about in this study is that we end up with the 94 people who, by choice, choose to be in the group receiving telemedicine might be different from the 94 people who are, by choice, chose not to receive telemedicine. A number of you, when you submitted your homework assignments, had a similar design, but up top, what you do is randomize people into one group or another. There you would hope the randomization would balance the two groups. Erin, you mentioned that randomization was not feasible or practical. Can you give us some insight on that here? Why you chose not to?
Well, I guess a lot of times when you're doing research in communities, it's very difficult to implement a randomization design because of the issues regarding acceptability within the community. Often you need to go in and discuss your research plan with all of the members prior to them, making the decision about whether or not they want to have people participate. And then, so that's the issue regarding, I guess, individual participation. We can't also have issues related to some people receiving an intervention and some people not within the same community, because people might not find that to be culturally acceptable. They don't want the possibility of some people receiving something that might be beneficial and other people being excluded from it within the same community. So sometimes it's possible to circumvent that by doing site randomization, but in this particular case it wasn't feasible because of technical issues in Hawaii regarding who was actually using telemedicine and who had the technical capabilities of participating. And then in Anchorage, even though we don't have the details quite finalized yet, it's just not going to be possible to predetermine, I guess, which sites would be receiving the intervention versus those who
balance practicality versus validity. And although I think I agree with those of you who said I would love to do a randomized trial, if that trial cannot be done practically, then this is probably the next best option to consider, something that is practical but perhaps less valid. So the price you'd be paying in this design is the potential for confounding and the need to adjust for factors in the analysis. And that's why the baseline information was collecting information on all these characteristics at baseline, which are likely to be predictors of where people stand 3 months later and 6 months later. So the fact that you're collecting this baseline information will allow you to do an adjusted analysis to control for differences in height, weight, hemoglobin A1C, etc. What you're not going to be getting from this design is the ability to control for other factors that influence the decision to be in one group or another and influence these outcomes, those unknown confounders. You wouldn't have the ability to control for things that you don't know about and didn't measure. A couple of comments came up from questions. One talked about biases here. Bias is another problem in this design. would be measuring these outcomes at 1 month and at 3 months and at 6 months, what you'd want to make sure is that you're measuring everything exactly the same in both groups. If the telemedicine group somehow gets more access to care through the telemedicine process itself, and that leads to measurements. If you are taking measurements from a medical record, not from you observing people directly as part of a protocol, but relying on usual care, if one group is seeing their doctors more often than another, therefore they're going to have their blood pressures taken more often than the other group, and they're going to have a greater chance of being recorded as high blood pressure, hypertension. So it's important to avoid those potentials for measurement biases by making sure that all outcomes are measured exactly the same in each group. And that's how I saw this being designed, Aaron, that you were going to be measuring everybody systematically at 3 months, everybody systematically at 6 months, regardless of which group they were in this case. Is that true? And ideally, when you take these measurements,
yes,
you'd like the person taking the measurement to be blinded to which group a person falls into. In other words, the person who's taking my blood pressure doesn't know I'm one of these 94 people who were in the telemedicine group, or doesn't know whether I'm one of these 94 people. It's his or her reading of my blood pressure and introducing a subjective, and therefore I'm avoiding the introduction of a subjective bias in this case, by knowledge of exposure status perhaps influencing the way outcomes are being recorded. Any other, let's see, I think we're pretty much out of time, but are there any other questions that anyone wants to raise about this particular design in light of what we've been saying in the last few lectures? Let's see, Patrick says you're still giving them a choice in the matter of the community. That's true. This design is not looking at the, one of the papers we looked at had randomized 2 communities, one to receive an intervention, a support mechanism based on a family member. The other group did not. The reason I take it, Aaron, you didn't do this design is that you don't have communities that you could randomize to one and another. And as I think I heard you say, it might be difficult to yeah, I was thinking and talking at the same time, and I was thinking about another design, which you are not doing, is you could randomize communities to receive
Fred,
telemedicine.
I kind of lost you at the end over there.
And the advantage of that design, community allocation, is that everybody in the same community would receive the same treatment. You wouldn't have to worry about the contamination mechanism here. It's possible that 2 neighbors with this design, one could be in the telemedicine group and the other in the non-telemedicine group. And just by talking to your neighbor who has this telemedicine option, that could influence the way care is practiced to you, because you might seek out care differently now, knowing that your neighbor receiving telemedicine is having a different level of care. I'm not sure how serious a problem that would be. The way you get around that is by having the design that we talked about in one of the papers last week.
That is definitely a potential problem.
Had one community, everyone receiving one intervention, the other community, everyone receiving different intervention. Okay. I think I've gone over, Aaron, so maybe we should stop here. I don't see any other questions popping up. If you do have any questions about what we've just been saying, please email me them. Just to repeat the announcement I made at the beginning, next week is an off week. It's a vacation week here. I won't be around, so we're meeting again in 2 weeks. I'm going to shift gears and start talking about statistics. And as a homework assignment, Erin's going to be sending you a very brief survey questionnaire. We want to collect some data on you. Anonymous, you don't have to give us your names, although she'll know who's sending her emails, but I won't know the answers. And we'll show you the results of the analysis of that survey. We're also working on trying to get one other data set to use as a template for much of our analysis. So that's where we're heading into in 2 weeks, shifting gears